So my name is Ulrike Bialas, and I'm a sociologist at the Max Planck Institute for the Study of Religious and Ethnic Diversity. So I work on questions at the intersection of migration and science and technology studies, or STS for short. And more specifically, I research how categories inform the governance and the experience of migration. So that includes both the kinds of categories and practices of categorization that states use to classify migrants and manage migration, but also how migrants themselves navigate and experience those categories. So for instance, in my most recent project, I examined age as a social category through the case of young asylum seekers in Germany who have no documentation to prove their date of birth and who sometimes don't even know their exact age at all. And I looked both at the forensic age determination exams that the German state uses to try to resolve this ambiguity, and also at how being classified as a minor or an adult affects young migrants' lives and trajectories. And right now, I am looking at the global proliferation of legal statuses, another really important category of difference. So I mostly do ethnography, which includes participant observations. So that means essentially being there with the people whose perspectives and experiences I'm trying to understand, as well as interviews, but always embedded in this fieldwork context. And I actually think ethnography is probably the most suitable method for answering the kinds of questions I have about categorization. So things like, what role do categories play in organizing social life? What do categories mean to different people? What are the long-term effects also of belonging to a particular category? And also the history of categories as social constructs, which usually involves some kind of disagreement, political interests, and just generally complexities that would never show up in statistics or even interviews for that matter, but that you really have to observe across situations and over time. So I think researching categories is significant because categories are both so central to social inequality and so easy to mistake as natural. And international migration is a really opportune site for examining the kinds of assumptions behind social categories, because when people migrate, they oftentimes move from countries with bureaucratic and cultural notions of categories that are very different from our own, and that suddenly makes it necessary for us to be really precise and explicit about what we mean by certain categories. And more often than not, we'll actually find that categories are really just proxies for something, and that they've been established to enable agreement on practices when it would be really, really difficult to agree on what the category stands for. So in the case of age, most of us agree that children and adults ought to have different rights and responsibilities, but it would be much harder to reach any kind of consensus about why that is so. You know, is it because 17-year-olds are more malleable or more vulnerable? Is it because they're innocent? And a quantitative category like age, I think, really kind of misguides us into sidestepping these really important debates about values, whereas international migration forces us to have them.